Western countries around the world are starting to get a bit fed up with uncontrolled and mass immigration. Just last month, the BBC in the UK reported small boat migrant crossings hit 50,000 under Labour. The exact figure is 50,271. This is despite Labour pledging to smash people-smuggling gangs and reduce channel crossing numbers. Either way, this means more than 50,000 people came to the UK via this route in the 403 days after Labour came to power in July 2024. That's about 125 people every single day who came illegally to the UK by small boat alone. Interestingly, countries like China don't seem to have this problem. I wonder what would happen if a small dinghy of refugees tried to sail into China. I can tell you what would happen. The Chinese authorities would immediately classify them as illegal entrants or a national security threat. The Coast Guard or Navy would likely fire a warning shot and tell them to turn around. If they refused, well, I think you can probably guess the rest. Funny how that works, isn't it? As a result, China has no refugee problem, and certainly no illegal boat people problem. In the recent Unite the Kingdom rally in the UK, the BBC reported dozens of officers injured as up to 150,000 joined Tommy Robinson rally. They of course highlighted the unacceptable violence and the far right. The ABC in Australia downplayed the numbers a little bit by saying, more than 100,000 anti-immigration protesters in UK amid scuffles with police. More than 100,000 is technically correct, but they could also have said more than 5 protesters, and that would have been technically correct as well. To be fair to The Guardian, they did publish drone footage of the event, showing streets and streets packed full of people. I don't know how they count these things, but it certainly looked like more than 100,000 to me. They wrote, aerial footage shows scale of Unite the Kingdom rally, noting that the Metropolitan Police believe about 110,000 people attended, compared to the 5,000 people who attended the Stand Up to Racism counter-march. Either way, using their figures, there were at least 22 times as many people attending the anti-immigration rally as there were the pro-immigration one. The Courier Mail in Australia was a bit more daring, publishing a video stating, big protest action, nearly 1 million hit UK streets against illegal immigration. Regardless of the numbers, whether it's 100,000 or hundreds of thousands, a lot of people are clearly fed up with the detrimental effects of too much immigration. The ABC in classic style was quick to dismiss these protesters using language such as, thousands took part in a far-right protest led by anti-immigration and anti-Islam activist Tommy Robinson in London on Saturday in what is thought to be the largest nationalist event in decades. Marches flooded central London for the demonstration, which was billed as a festival of free speech but featured racist conspiracy theories and anti-Muslim speech. So yes, if you attended, according to the ABC, you are a far-right racist. Here's one eating a hot dog. Of course, over the weekend, there were marches in Australia as well. The ABC reported thousands of protesters face off in opposing rallies against racism and mass migration. They noted that opposing groups came within metres of one another. Oh no, we can't have fellow Australians getting close to one another. They also reported that groups protesting for Indigenous sovereignty marched through city streets voicing their opposition to racism and anti-immigration views. I've always found that strange. These Indigenous sovereignty groups purport to be against the anti-immigration people, but isn't the whole idea of Indigenous sovereignty that no one else belongs here? I mean, surely they're against immigration too. The Australian government is letting people into the country without their permission. You'd think the Aboriginal sovereignty people and the anti-mass immigration people would be on the same team, at least with regards to their dislike of immigration. But no, apparently not. Indigenous Australian artist Kaya Nicholson Ward told the crowd in Melbourne over the weekend, all immigrants are welcome on my country, not racists and not fascists. Hate never was and never will have a place on this land. What about racist immigrants? And what about intertribal warfare that existed pre-colonisation? Here's an analogy for you. Imagine there are four people living in a three-bedroom flat or an apartment in an Australian city. Two of them are a couple, so they live in the same bedroom. The others have their own room. Everything is fine. They've all got their own space and live reasonably comfortably. Now imagine the government said, right, now you have to have two more people living in your apartment. Okay, so they could probably make that work. They could buy a couple of extra beds or put mattresses on the floor. It wouldn't be ideal and it might cause some tension, but they could possibly make it work. But imagine the government said that because of a backlog of immigration due to a global pandemic or whatever, they would now have to have an extra 5 people in their flat, a total of 11 now living in this little 3-bedroom apartment. Naturally, this would cause a lot of tension. People would start to get on each other's nerves. There simply isn't enough space or facilities in this little unit to hold so many people. But imagine on top of that some of these new roommates didn't speak very good English and came from distinctly different cultural and religious backgrounds. Of course, this would cause problems. I would say the main problem is that there are simply too many people living in such a confined area, but of course, linguistic and cultural barriers could also cause potential problems. Some of you might be thinking, don't be ridiculous, nobody would live like that in Australia. Well, the Conversation reported in November last year, 20 people in a 2-bedroom apartment, the growing health and safety risks of hotbedding. Hotbedding is where people share the same bed in shifts in overcrowded rooms. My fictional scenario of 11 people living in a 3-bedroom flat now sounds quite luxurious. Let's rewind to the 4 initial people who were living comfortably previously. If they were told by the government that they would have to accept one more flatmate, but this time the government would build a new bedroom and a new bathroom to help accommodate the new person, well, that would go down a lot better. Obviously, my point is, most people are happy with controlled, sustainable immigration. If the government builds plenty of infrastructure to accommodate the new immigrants, then of course most Australians would be okay with that. But that's not what we're seeing. In April, the ABC reported, calls for better planning as Aussie suburbs feel the squeeze amid migration housing pressures. So obviously, we're seeing plenty of people coming to Australia, but simply not enough infrastructure being built. Of course, this will cause tensions in society, and we see that playing out on the streets. It's easy for the media to dismiss these mass immigration protesters as far-right racists. And frankly, that's just lazy journalism. Because in the real world, for most people, their frustration has nothing to do with race. It has everything to do with the fact that governments are allowing more and more people into our countries without the housing and infrastructure to support them. When you have too many people and not enough resources, you create tension. And that's exactly what we're seeing play out across the Western world.